I saw a man in the subway. The first night, he only caused me one thought. As work had been tough, it was a Monday, the weather was miserable, even for Boston in January. Sleet and sub-zero winds punished me as I walked down into the subway station to ride the T. The new job I started, synchronous with New Year, was a disappointment. The masks itched at my face, and my boss was an ass. My coworkers were assholes. The commute was long. The hours were long. The idea that this horrible day was likely to be the new norm weighed on me heavily as I sunk deep into my chair, waiting to escape on the last train of the night. The concoction of smells unique to train stations and subways hung low as I sulked when I caught a glimpse of his foot. I got up to get a better look then, and saw a man sprawled out like a rag doll over the train railing. He faced down, chest over the electrified rail. Above him, along the walls of the tunnel, was a sign that read, "Danger, high voltage," with a yellow triangle surrounding the lightning bolt symbol. The man wore a long New England Patriots t-shirt that sported black holes distributed sporadically. A small blackened outline went around the perimeter of each circle. He laid barefoot, hands contorted into something of a fist, unmoving. A pair of rats ran over his legs, crossing the tracks, seeking refuge of the darkness. At least I'm not having a day as bad as his, I thought, looking down at this man's terrible fate. Shame overcame me almost immediately for having that morbid thought. But that vanished quickly. Truth is, seeing the misfortune befallen this man served as some perspective for the shit day I endured. The thought came and left as I returned to my seat. The cacophony created by the grinding of metal echoed throughout the joined, that musky smell in the otherwise empty station. My ride home had arrived. The second night, he caused one shudder, just one. My day at work had been marginally better than Monday, but the pesky late commute had me down, and I stood waiting, earphones in, mindlessly listening. I saw the man laying in the same position, unmoved. I shuddered and turned away. Suddenly, my outlook was a bit brighter. At least I wasn't this guy. But the third night was the same as the second, and the fourth came, and same as the third, and each day I saw him, he looked worse. His body decayed, forgotten on the tracks. On the fifth night, Friday evening, I sat in my usual spot, waiting. The station wasn't as deserted as previous nights. Earphones in hand, I enjoyed the guitar playing of a musician afar, a little ways down the subway. A group of college students laughed loudly, interrupting my concentration, but I didn't mind. I smiled and enjoyed their excitement vicariously, reliving something in myself that's long since been lost. With my mood lifted by the coming weekend, I walked towards the musician, dropped a 5 in his case, and flashed a thumbs up. He wasn't bad. As I walked back to my seat, on my way back I saw he was still there. I approached to get a better look and recoiled back at the sight. What just a few days ago was a man falling and dying by the hand of high voltage rails was now a body of charred, rotting flesh. His clothes had diminished to burned shreds of cloth covering arbitrary parts of his body. On his upper thigh, rats had feasted, leaving a gaping hole deep enough to expose bone. His hair, or what remained of it anyway, was stiff and blackened clumps, hanging from pieces of scalp that subsequently hung from his skull. His eye sockets were absent of eyes. 2 black holes stared upwards. Sitting above what remained of his nose, sores covered his body. Pockets of maggots and formed around his body, wiggling in joy as they feasted. If you think that's bad, the smell was worse. You'd think the cold below ground weather would serve as a natural refrigeration, right? Wrong. I looked around thinking, is anyone seeing this? No, not a soul was around, besides the guitar player, and he was now packing up, getting ready to leave. The group of college students had caught their train to the start of a fun weekend, I'm sure, and I hurried back to my seat, holding my breath. Then the thought hit me, like the train hadn't yet arrived. Wouldn't the passing trains of the week have run him over? Wouldn't his body have moved? How could his body still relatively be intact? Wasn't he facing down the previous days? Hadn't anyone moved his body? Nobody reported this accident? My train arrived and I entered an empty car like a zombie going through the motions. My mind was foggy as it ran through the thoughts of this poor soul. He was facing down on Monday. I distinctly remember seeing a rat run over the back of his neck. I took a single step in and turned. The doors closed inches from my ears that were lost in thought. "Last stop," said the robotic voice over the intercom. I stared back through the smudged window at the rail. I looked for him, trying to confirm my suspicion that his body had been moved. I found him in the darkness below, but the mass of rotting flesh was writhing. No, it was moving, struggling to stand. His body was shapeless. Joints were dislocated, skin was charred or covered in maggots. I stared, using what was once a knee as support. The man stumbled up. His spine was clearly broken, giving him a tilted, upright position. He turned, my eyes locked with his sockets. They were absent. I'll never forget as the black holes on his face absorbed me. The train began its acceleration. Eyes locked, he raised his right hand in a fist, with his index finger pointing out. The finger crept to his face, landing perpendicular to his lips. Echoed through the train. A smile cracked his lips. His mouth was void of teeth, completing the triad of black holes on his face. As the train began to move, the man slowly began limping, walking over the electrified rail. He walked in the opposite direction as I was moving. Smoke rose from his feet with each step. He walked, and the darkness of the tunnel swallowed him.